Babble with Ben.
This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be participating today. Welcome to the Babble, Kaiyah Mercedes.
Hello.
Nice to have you on.
It's so good to be here.
Thanks for coming in on this kind of rainy sort of autumn morning here in Melbourne.
Yes, the weather is absolutely delightful.
I was bringing in all the gear and the lights were getting wet and I'm like, this is probably going to kill me, but oh well.
Oh, well, it's fine.
Now, you have got a lot of things to talk about today. Where would you like to start? I mean, you've just put out your new album, Hindsight, maybe, is it a month?
Yeah,
month and a half ago?
No, it actually came out in October.
Oh, my
so
goodness.
It's been
so I'm
a few months. Oh, I think I counted it was like 7.
7 months now, hey?
I think. I'm not very good at math. But yeah, it was very, very cool to release my first album at, how old was I, 16? Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah, definitely. What were the challenges in putting out your first album?
Oh my gosh, it was a long process. Like, I think we recorded it over the span of a year.
Wow, yeah. So it started when you would have been 14, 15.
Yeah, 14.
Yeah.
I turned I think I was 15 actually. I started writing when I was 13 though. So it was like a 3-year process of releasing the album. But because it was recorded over such a long span, it was quite disorganized and it was very go with the flow sort of thing. Like we would record a song and be like, okay, we're going to release this as a single now. We hadn't had the whole album recorded before we started planning it. So it was a very disorganized mess, but it feels pretty accurate to the album and to who I was when I wrote and released it. So I don't know, I will always love that album with my whole heart.
Absolutely. It's your first one.
Yeah.
Did you have because it sounds so professional and so lovely, right? How did you go about getting the team together to make it happen?
It very much happened on its own. I mean, Mum was researching a lot about producers and stuff in the local area. People always think that it's like some big thing when you get a producer, but we literally just Googled Chris Wilson and messaged him and was like, hey, want to record a song together? And he's amazing. He's been in the music industry for like 40 years and played every single instrument on the album except the bass on the track Hindsight, which was done by Chris Rock. And Chris had a friend from Warner Music who did the mixing and mastering, which was really cool to say that someone from Warner Music, mixed and mastered my first album. It was very intimate process, like getting to know these people and becoming friends with them and working on them for this album. It was a very cool process.
That's amazing. There's a strong tone of heartbreak that I pick up in Hindsight. Is there a bit of a story behind that, or?
Yeah, I did date someone when I was 13. Did not go very well. It was before I really knew a lot about myself. Before I realized that I was queer, and so there was a lot of things that I would not do if I knew that about myself like then. But yeah, I think it was influenced by that, but also it focused a lot on the mental health struggles that I had afterwards, not knowing that I'm autistic and have ADHD. I got a PTSD diagnosis afterwards, struggles with anxiety, depression sort of thing. So that's what that whole album was like written. It was looking back with the knowledge that I have all of these things that have occurred since then. Yeah.
Was it hard to express that vulnerable aspect of yourself?
I've actually never found that as a barrier. I have always been very honest and vulnerable in my music. I think it's because the people who have influenced me have always shown their truest self through their music, and they've never been afraid to write some stuff that is difficult to say. So I think growing up with those influences, people like Taylor Swift, who are just so brutally honest, it's made me aware that I don't have to be afraid to share that through an artistic lens.
Absolutely. I think Taylor Swift is just one of those voices of a generation. She seems to have just this amazing influence over the musical landscape at the moment. Who else would be in your list of influences?
I think Dave Grohl is one of my biggest influences as well. He's just so talented in so many areas. Like his video, I think it was maybe the 20-minute long video where he plays every single instrument for 20 minutes straight and like they've edited it all together. That is one of my favorite videos to watch. It just shows how incredibly talented he is, but he's so humble in the way that he's not like, I'm the most talented person ever. He's just, I don't know. And his songwriting also is just really incredible in a completely different way to Taylor Swift, in a way that I don't really know how to express. But Taylor and Dave both have two different sides of like the person that I want to become as a musician. And so they're very different, but they're also just so creative and talented and raw, which is what I love about them.
They haven't done a collaboration yet, have they?
Unfortunately not. If they have,
wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh my God, if they did, I would listen to it on repeat all the time. It would be a dream for them to collaborate.
And you'd think it could be done, but we'll have to wait and see for that one, hey?
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully.
With your songwriting process, do you play an instrument?
Yeah, I play piano and guitar. I taught myself both of those instruments when I was 13 at the start of the COVID lockdowns because I was like really bored and I wanted to start songwriting, but I don't know. It's easier to songwrite when you have an instrument, so I started teaching myself.
Yeah, it helps when you've got to work out those melodies, and especially when you place them over a chord or something like that as well. It's much, much easier when you've got that harmonic instrument that you can play with, hey?
Instruments can really influence lyrics to an extent that non-songwriters don't realize, I think.
Do you tend to write your music down as notation, or do you just tend to go, okay, that's the chords and I sort of know which voicings for the piano to go? Or
Yeah, I do tend to just write down the chords. I don't really do notations or sheet music or anything like that. I'll just write down the chords and the lyrics, and then I'll do a voice recording or a video.
Yep.
But I'm also, for someone who has a really terrible memory, I'm extremely good at remembering my songs. Like I could play a song that I wrote when I was 13 and haven't played in 4 years.
Wow.
And play it perfectly. I might mess up one chord or something, but I know the melodies because, I don't know, they're just like ingrained in my brain.
I have the opposite problem. I have been to gigs in the past where I've just been so nervous that I've printed out all the lyrics to my own songs and I've just had them there almost like a safety blanket, you know, because I'm like, oh God, what if I forget the lyrics to my own song?
Yeah.
But I think your approach is probably much, much more pro because like I think you're more expressive when you've got those songs internalized, hey? I
do definitely, like there has been times where I've forgotten lyrics, or once I was playing a gig at the Rubber Chicken. It was an open mic that I used to play quite regularly. And I was introducing this song. It's called Don't Forget My Name. And I did this whole thing where I was like explaining the meaning of the song and stuff. And then I went to go say the song's title and I completely forgot. And it was funny because the song's called Don't Forget My Name. And I literally had to look at Mum in the audience and be like, what's the song's name? And she mouthed it to me and I was like, crap. The fact that it's called Don't Forget My Name just makes this 10 times more embarrassing, but it's so funny.
Yeah, there's a certain irony to that, isn't there? Yeah. Definitely. So how have you gone? So you've been gigging as well as releasing the songs as well, right? How are you finding that? Are you how are you going? I imagine a lot of these are sort of pubs and clubs, right? Are you finding that there's a barrier as you're underage, or?
There tends to be some barriers, but a lot of the time whenever I'm booked for gigs, like I'm playing for Michael Gate this month as a support act, and a lot of the venues are like typically overage because they serve alcohol and stuff. And, you know, my mum who manages my gigs and everything, she was like checking with the booking agent, like, Kaiyah is under 18. Can you double check that she will be allowed to perform? So there's typically, as long as I'm with my mum who comes with me to every gig, then it's usually fine. We definitely just need a double check though. Yeah, it would be terrible rocking up to a gig and then being like, oh, we didn't know you were under 18. Oops.
Yeah, I was wondering if that might have happened in the past because I can see how it would. Like, oh, yeah, it'd be a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, but it hasn't happened yet, thankfully.
How are you finding the live performance? Are you finding you're building your fan base and people are, you're starting to see familiar faces maybe at some gigs?
It's actually pretty crazy. I was playing at Sanford Bush Music Festival a few months ago and I did my performance on the main stage. I did about 4 performances that weekend and I did my one on the main stage and I was walking back to my tent and we got talking to this couple and the lady was saying that she recognized my voice from Frankston Waterfront Festival, which was the month prior. And it was so cool that someone like recognized me from another gig. Like I've never had that before. And that was the most surreal thing to hear. Like, I don't know. It's cool seeing people who just happen to be at another gig and they remember your performance. Like that's just all I could ask for, really.
Yeah, that's pretty magic. That's really magic. I remember when I started to have people like sort of friends of friends or like friends of friends of friends start recognizing me from this podcast, right? And I was like, oh, wow. Like it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I was like, you don't want to be like, oh, look at me, I'm a superstar sort of stuff, but there's a certain pleasure from it.
There really is, yeah.
It's kind of, part of what we work towards, hey?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I don't know. It's not like I'm doing this so that people will recognize me on the street, but having people recognize you for your work and like remember the sound of your voice, even if they don't know your name, like this lady just recognized the sound of my voice. Like that was so cool. That's
particularly cool because it's one thing if someone recognizes you by your look or by an outfit, right? But when someone recognizes you for your voice, which is like, the core of your artistic practice, right? Then that's pretty special.
Yeah.
Now, you've got some new work coming out soon too. You're working with a previous guest here, Satali.
Yes, Satali. Oh my God, I love her so much. She is my new producer and I've got a song coming out called Hide With Me on the 26th of May, which is fully produced by Satali. But I've been working on a lot of other stuff with her as well, which has been really fun. And, I think working with Satali has been the most amazing experience because she's more than a producer. She's like a friend. And she's someone like, she's also in my band. She's my guitarist. So it's really cool to be able to know someone personally and in like a professional environment as well and still be able to like have so much fun. Like I love going to the studio with Satali because I just have the best time. Like even if I'm having a crap time, like with my mental health, I'll go in and it just makes my day so much better.
That's what you want in a producer, hey? You definitely want, because you can certainly hear with some bands when they're not, when they're not gelling with the producer and especially if there's like substance abuse or drug problems with a band, you can hear that in recordings, especially like some of the sort of 80s stuff from I don't know, some of those sort of hair rock bands, right? You can sort of hear that there's friction there and it's not always their best work. And so for you to have found a producer that you really gel with and you're friends with and also is part of your band as well, that's really, really lucky.
I feel like I am producing my best work and Satali really like, one thing with me and my music is I always like to just do weird ideas, like samples and stuff that is not typically like conventional, I guess. And Satali just embraces these ideas and then just adds something weirder on top. Like we can go on the weirdest tangents sometimes, stuff that will never make it actually onto the track, but we can imagine, it's just, it's so fun.
These would be quite different songs to what you wrote when you were 13, I'm imagining.
Definitely. They're much more mature and my songwriting has definitely improved. There are also 2 co-writes with Francesca de Valence. So my last album was completely self-written and this one's got 2 co-writes. So that's definitely a new step for me and you can see in the lyricism that there is definitely a different influence there. But I'm so proud of these songs that I've written. Like they're completely different genre, completely different like just like the symbolism and the depth is a lot more strong in this album, I think.
if Hindsight is sort of a folky ballad sort of album, right? What's the name of the new release?
The new song is Hide With Me.
Hide With Me. Where is this going? What genre are you sort of exploring with Hide With Me?
I'm sort of more going for like an indie pop sort of thing. So it's definitely more on the pop side, which that comes through a lot in my melodies and stuff. Like I have very catchy melodies, but in terms of the instrumentation, it's definitely more pop with the indie influence with electric guitars. I love electric guitars.
Yeah, a bit of jangly electric guitar, definitely. And so what sort of themes are you going to be exploring?
This is like the first time that in my music I've really talked about being queer. Like I'm very, especially this song Hide With Me, I wrote it about like inspired by Heartstopper, which, yeah, you know Heartstopper?
Oh, that was, yeah, no. Without meaning to interrupt for too long, I'm queer as well, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a bit older than you. I'm 41, right? Heartstopper was so amazing for me because I had grown up in the 90s and 2000s, and there was this theme. I don't know where it came from. I think it was one of the. It's like a modesty or a morals code from American TV from like the 50s or 60s, right? And it felt like every time gay couples were portrayed on TV, right, there had to be a tragedy at the end of them. You know what I mean? It had to be, one of them died, and more often than not, it was, HIV/AIDS, right? And so for Heartstopper to come along on Netflix, all bright and colourful and pastel, and not only did no one die, right, the two characters end up together. It was just it brought such a smile to my face, really.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. Like, even as I'm only 16, but I definitely have seen the bury your gays trope a lot, even in like the more modern, like recent 10 years. Like, there's still so much tragedy in like queer television, even like literature as well. And so Heartstopper was really just like the most amazing show to watch. I've seen it so many times. I'm actually obsessed. But yeah, it was inspired by that and the story between Nick and Charlie. And it's called Hide With Me because I wrote it from Charlie's perspective to Nick, where he was kind of like saying, it's okay to take your time and figure yourself out. I'll hide with you. Like, it's about like discovering your sexuality while finding love and being able to keep that private but not secret. So I think it's like, especially when I was figuring out my sexuality, it was a difficult process, and it was in between like COVID lockdowns and stuff. So it was very isolating, not only physically but mentally as well. And even though I have the most supportive family, it's still like you always have that thought in the back of your mind, what if it's different because it's me? And so seeing, having that acceptance from my family, and then coming into like acceptance at school, and then seeing accepting TV shows and all of this media, it's really made me feel so comfortable in my sexuality. And I have no fear. Like, sometimes I forget that homophobia even exists because I'm so comfortable in who I am that it makes no difference how other people perceive me. And so I really wanted to start being really honest in the next songs that I've started writing. And I write about people I have crushes on, and I'll use she pronouns, talk about these girls that I like. And it's so freeing being able to write about that and have no fear.
That is great, because it was, for the longest time, the pronouns was such a big deal for songwriters, wasn't it? Because, I mean, a classic example of something similar, right? You know Savage Garden? Oh, there's a band. It's a 90s band called Savage Garden. Lead singer is queer, right? But of course, because it was the 90s and he wanted to be a pop star, he had to hide it, right? There's a song called To the Moon and Back where he keeps on singing about she. She's taking her time. She always refers to as she. But then some 20 years later, he goes and says, oh, no, that's me. He's talking about himself. And so it's wonderful to see that the current generation is liberated from that. Because I've quite often used like they and them to sort of make it ambiguous as well. But I think, the idea of just saying, like, if I could just say he or something like that, that's such a big deal, and I'm glad that you are doing that. It's so inspiring.
Yeah, I typically do write songs where I like singing directly to the person I'm writing about, so I'll use a lot of you. But there are very few songs that I've written where I'm talking in like a different perspective and I use the she, her pronouns, or when I talk about myself, I'll use they, them pronouns because I use she, they pronouns. So it's amazing when I'm doing interviews or have like people writing blogs about me and stuff or write-ups in the newspaper and they'll ask what my pronouns are. Like, or whenever I do something with Frankston Council, they'll ask what my pronouns are and they'll make sure that like I have like a little she, they badge, which I got from Frankston Youth Services. And so it's just amazing to see so much more inclusivity. And I really just want to, on my social media, I'm very open about being queer and my pronouns and my sexuality. And so I just want to make that so much more obvious and accepted in my work.
Well, you're doing a great job. Absolutely. Like, yeah, no, it really is. It you know, as one of the, you know, sort of middle-aged queer, it's really, 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 really nice to see, you know, the current generation. Because, I mean, there is currently a lot of flack against the queer community. I mean, you might have seen in the papers these days, there have been, you know, like far-right protests against drag shows and stuff like that. And I find, you know, like, gosh, it feels like every time, you know, we take 2 steps forward, there's 1 step back. But I think overall, the community's pretty resilient. Yeah.
I definitely keep up with queer news and stuff like globally. And, you know, it does hurt to see other queer communities hurting across the world. But you do just see such immense resilience within these communities, and no matter how many times we get knocked down, we always stand back up and we stand back up even harder. And there are so many celebrities who are standing up for these minorities now. Like you see so many more also like autistic celebrities and figures in the media, or people with ADHD who are open about that, which has made also me more comfortable expressing like I'm neurodivergent. Like, so I don't know, all of these people who have been so open in their careers have influenced me to be open in my careers because I know how much that's helped me.
Absolutely. And it is nice to, because I'm neurodivergent too, and it is nice to see that recognition that the community is now, because you're not, you know, we're not just those quiet little weirdos in the corner at the parties anymore. Like there's a recognition that, hey, we've got something to offer. Just because we're not, you know, trying to edge our way into the conversation doesn't mean we're rude. It just means we might be just a little bit overwhelmed. And
yeah, exactly. And I think something that makes me so willing to keep talking about being neurodivergent is when, like, on Facebook, I've done posts and stuff about being autistic, and I've had people comment like, seeing you be successful as an autistic person makes me confident that my child will be able to be successful and have a great career and do whatever they want, because there is still definitely a stigma that autistic people have so many less opportunities, which statistically looking, there definitely is less opportunity for us in the workplace. But there is so much, like if we just get a little bit of support, if we just get a few accommodations, then we can be so successful. Autism it's a disability when looking at how the world is structured for neurotypical people, but it is not a disability meaning that we can't achieve anything. We can achieve so much. We just have to not let the idea that being autistic can stop us actually stop us.
Absolutely. I know I find in my own day-to-day life, I'm really, really highly susceptible to burnout, because once I get stuck on something, right, I really just want to do it to the best of my ability and as quickly as possible, right? But I'm now, for example, with this podcast, right, it used to be that I would sit down and I would edit it all in one day and I'd do all the, the little clips and the subtitles all in one day, right? And then all of a sudden I can't do anything the next day, right? I don't even want to look at the computer the next day. Whereas now I'm like, right, if I get, 2 hours worth of decent work, then I've got to take a break, Like it's not, I don't know whether you might have found this or not, where you get that hyper focus and you just like, you want to do this one thing 100% for 8 hours. And then the next day you're like, oh God, can I even get out of bed?
Yeah, I definitely am still trying to navigate how to stop burnout. Like for the past 2 months, I've been in this like really intense state of burnout, which it stemmed from like school and I have a job and I have music and I have like so many things going on all the time, and I want to keep doing all of these things because they're all things that I'm very passionate about and things that I love so much. But I'm still definitely trying to figure out how to stop myself from going into these slumps where it's like 2 weeks of periods where I'm like struggling with my depression and I'm struggling with burnout and I'm struggling with doing anything at all because I'm so focused on like doing everything all at the same time. Which I think people don't talk about enough. Like they'll talk about burnout, but they'll talk about it in very mild cases. But there is such a severity to it that can really impact every single part of your life. And yeah, autistic burnout is such a difficult thing to navigate, especially when you just want to hyper-focus on the things you like all the time.
That's what I'm finding. I'm like, and this idea that you can be burnt out by doing things you love. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, well, look, I've got this essay for a subject I don't like, or, I've got this job that I don't like that's just burnt me out, right? But when it's like, oh wow, I've been working on this new music that I'm really passionate about and a video clip to go with it. And then you're done at the end and you're like, oh God, why can't I start this essay that's due tomorrow, right? Like, yeah, it's funny how, I think, look, putting, some big glasses to look at the past, right? I think this mentality sort of comes from the industrial age, when people started, working on machines and the idea that the machines could run all day and all night and therefore the people had to run all day and all night. It's not natural, this idea that we should just be able to produce consistent amounts of work. That's not how human beings work.
Exactly. And one thing that it's something that people don't talk about a lot, but humans are like the only mammals on Earth who don't go into hibernation, which is like something, if you look at seasonal depression, that makes so much sense. Like we force ourselves to work all the time because that's something that society's been set up to do. But like, if you look at, like, I'm a history nerd. I like do so many history subjects at school. If you look at the past, like autistic people actually coped so much better in the past because we were able to do jobs that we loved and that were repetitive tasks all the time. We were able to work on our own schedules and have our own space. Whereas now the world is set up so neurotypical and it's so just in your face all the time. You have to be doing everything, otherwise you aren't successful, which is just it's the mentality that sets everyone up for burnout.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember even, a year ago, right? If I was laying on the couch, like maybe just looking at TikTok or doing whatever, I just feel so guilty because I'm like, oh, I should be productive every hour of every day, especially when you're an artist or when you're self-employed. You really do feel that guilt. It's like, oh, this needs to be done. I should do that now, because I am very guilty of procrastinating sometimes, but then it's hard to figure out what is procrastinating and what is just needing a rest.
Yeah, it's a fine line that I'm definitely trying to navigate at the moment, especially considering like my diagnoses of autism and ADHD are so new. Like there's so many things that even like I realized like I was writing songs about my struggles with autism before I even knew I was autistic. Like there are so many things that I'm trying to figure out how to be able to function all the time, take the breaks that I need, but also work hard. Like I work so hard and then I'll go into slumps where I just can't work. But I want to be working, and even when I'm taking these breaks, I will feel guilt, just like you said. Like, I don't know. And having the autism and ADHD, both of them are just like a hurricane in my brain. I remember I had an assignment a few weeks ago for ancient history where I had to do a report that was a few thousand words long. And I left it till 2 days till the due date.
1,000 words, was it?
A few thousand.
A few thousand, right.
Yeah. This is a subject I love, but I'd procrastinated and left it till the last minute. And then I was like, crap. And I get that ADHD dopamine, like the rush. And I was like, I spent 12 hours in one day on this essay until I completely burnt myself out. And I loved it, but then I needed a break.
Okay, so we're back after a little bit of technical problems, right? And we had just been talking about burnout, hadn't we?
Yes, we have.
Well, look, it is definitely something that I think neurodivergent people struggle with. And yeah, look, I think one thing that's really helped me is just anticipating it, like if I've got a big like for example with today's podcast, right, I will make sure that I've got the rest of the afternoon off just to sort of recover from it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I find that my only way that I can properly recover is to be with my friends.
Yeah.
Because obviously when I'm with people who I don't really connect with very well, social battery goes way down.
Yeah.
But most of my best friends are also musicians. And I met them at a gig and they're in a band. And so when I'm with them, all we'll do is we'll play music and we'll talk about music and we'll have so much fun just being together, being surrounded by music, which is something we all love. We all love being with each other and we all love music. So yeah, I love being connected with musicians. That's something that it's like even with working with Sitali, that's something that I find it's work, but it helps me recover because I'm being with someone who I feel like understands me.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you'll find that there are a lot of neurodivergent people in the music community, definitely. I think there's, I don't know what the correlation is, but it's definitely there, I think.
Yeah, it's almost like how music therapy is a thing. Yes. I find that something talking with my therapist, she's like, music has helped you so much. She has seen it in the way since as my career has progressed and the more of my life has been surrounded by music, the better I've gotten. Writing albums and songs about what I'm going through is something that helps me more than anything else could. So yeah, music and being neurodivergent or struggling with mental health is just something that's so intertwined, I think.
I think so too. I definitely have found, because I used to have a very corporate life. We're doing IT stuff, right? And since, I had major burnout from that after doing it full time for 2 years, right? And then, this career this journey into music with Box Hill has been a kind of therapy for me, definitely. And I've benefited from it immensely.
That's good.
Fantastic. Well, we'll wrap it up here. So you've got what's the name of the track again?
Hide With Me.
Hide With Me. And that's coming out on May 26th?
Yes.
Fantastic. Now, how can people find you on the intertubes?
I am on Instagram and Facebook, so just Kaiyah Mercedes. If you need that spelled, it's Kaiyah, and then Mercedes like the car. I have a very difficult name to spell. And then I'm on literally any streaming platform you can think of. So you can find my music there if you want to listen to my last album, Hindsight. But I'm very, very excited for this new song. It's a new direction, but it's so authentic and I'm very excited.
The next chapter, hey?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Kaiyah, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good one.